Welcome to a revision video on the GCSE course, Philosophy and Ethics, and this is Unit B604. It's on the OCR specification. It's around the topic of peace and justice. So what I've done first is give you an example of some of the questions from previous years that you might be asked. So gives you an idea of the sorts of things you might actually be looking for when it comes to answering the questions. So there's questions about punishment in there, questions about how criminals are treated, and questions about prison. This just shows you that in some of the questions you might get a whole range of questions just around the whole area of punishment and actually not touch upon any other topics. It's hard to know what the questions are going to be like, but you have to be prepared to know all the areas and to be able to discuss all the areas in a detailed way. So first things first, what are we talking about when we're talking about punishment? Well, there are different types of punishment. Firstly, you get the simple fines where you end up having to pay money. Secondly, you've got something called capital punishment, otherwise known as the death penalty or the death sentence. You've got what everyone knows as prison. You've got different types of prisons as well, high security, low security prisons. And you've got community service, and this is where people basically don't get put in prison, but they end up basically doing work out in the community because their crimes aren't deemed very serious. So they're the different types of punishment. There are more, but there's 4 for you to try and remember. Secondly, we're talking about, importantly, the aims of punishment. What does punishment seek to try to do to people and to obviously to the members of society as well? Well, one aim of punishment is retribution. This basically means where somebody is getting something similar to something like payback for crimes committed. For example, being given prison sentences or the death sentence is a form of retribution for doing an act of criminality. Secondly, the aim of punishment is to deter, which basically means to put others off committing crime. You want to deter people from doing things, so when they know the punishment is going to be serious, they don't actually want to do it. Thirdly, it's to reform the behaviour, and reform means to change the behaviour, to show the offender that committing crime is not good, and through education and training, trying to get them to try and be productive and live meaningful lives in society. And fourthly, to protect, obviously, members of the public, and everyone else needs to be protected and kept safe from people who commit serious offences. So these are the specific aims of punishment that you need to be familiar with. The last thing to say about these, that the different types of punishment, prison, fines, death sentence, community service, could achieve some, all, maybe 1 or 2 of these aims. So each punishment could actually achieve any one of these aims as well, not just one specific type of punishment. The causes of crimes are varied. Very simply, causes of crime could be greed. Somebody wants something off you and takes it. So drug addictions, alcohol addictions can fuel people to commit burglary and other acts where they steal things. Power, they simply want to be seen as powerful. Low self-esteem, if people don't feel good about themselves, they might do things that are considered to be criminality. Poor upbringing, if you're being brought up badly or you've been around people that have done criminality, then it's not going to be unusual for you, and you may end up doing that. Also poverty, if you're poor, come from a poor background, you might end up wanting a better life, and criminality or criminal action might be a way for you to do that. None of these reasons justify crime or make it acceptable. They're simply reasons why people do it. There may be others. If you can think of others, great, use those as well. Remember, you need to think, just like I've said, of specific examples of how each one could cause people to commit crimes. So, the treatment of criminals. How should criminals be treated? So from a Christian point of view, most Christians believe that criminals should have their opportunity to become better people and reform, change their behaviour. Some Christians do believe in the death sentence. In the Old Testament, for really serious crimes, it talks about an eye for an eye, which basically means if you've taken someone's life, then your life should be taken as well. But all Christians agree that all human beings should be treated with dignity and respect. They are still created in the image of God, whether they're criminals or not criminals. Christians do believe in forgiveness of criminals, but it doesn't mean that the criminal does not have to pay for their crime, which could mean go to prison. All Christians, as far as I'm aware, believe in the concept of justice and fairness within a society, and that involves punishment or punishing those who break the law. Christians believe the law is good and governments have a responsibility to administer justice. They would even suggest in certain parts of the Bible that God puts governments in place, and their job is to obviously then create the laws. Christians believe, as many other people do, that the punishment should fit the crime. You shouldn't over-punish people for lesser crimes or treat people badly if they've only done some minor offence. So that's how treatment of criminals should be dealt with from a Christian point of view. Do prisons work? One of the things to think about is that some people think prison is too easy. They imagine prisoners all have TVs and PlayStations and basically are able to do whatever they want. But clearly that is not the case. Many prisoners, or a lot of prisons, are where prisoners are locked up for 18 to 20 hours a day. The big question about prison is, how do we want prisoners to come out of prison? Do we want them rehabilitated or ready to go back into crime and then go back into prison? Prisons run education programs, and whilst they trying to punish people, they must also try to make society safer when prisons leave. Unfortunately, there are huge reoffending rates for prisons as well, which doesn't benefit society or the prisoners themselves. So you need to think about whether or not you think prisons work and the way that prisons work as well. And are there alternatives? What are those alternatives? Capital punishment, otherwise known as the death sentence. Some people think that the death sentence is valid and good, and others think it's not. And obviously the death sentence is only really used for the most serious of crimes, and it divides opinion. Some people believe it's right to end the life of a criminal, while others think it's inhumane. A quote could be, "Killing is wrong, whoever does it." Or, "Society needs to be protected from these people. What better protection than death?" So there's varied opinions about the death sentence, and again, you need to be clear about what your thoughts are on this. But some Christians also are varied in their opinions. In the Bible, the Old Testament, it talks about if you take someone's life, you should pay for it, an eye for an eye. But also in the Bible it says thou shalt not kill, which you could infer from that it's wrong to take someone else's life, regardless of who they are or what they've done. Now obviously for Christians, Jesus is the key figure, character, who they look to for advice and guidance. And one of the many quotes Jesus said is, if someone hits you on one cheek, turn to him the other cheek as well. And this suggests that you shouldn't take revenge or use violence against other people. The death penalty is obviously where violence is used. You're going to need to be able to give your own opinion on whether you think the death penalty is acceptable. You need to think of reasons. You need to think of reasons some people disagree with it, and come up with also non-religious reasons. And the more you can think of, the better you'll be able to discuss the pros and cons of capital punishment. Key part of this topic as well is the area of violence. There's a whole range of different words on the screen that are connected to the issues of violence, intimidation, threats, computer games, anger, television, revenge, injury, fear, manipulation, protection, genocide. All of these words are connected to violence in some way. And what you're going to need to do is be able to think about, how do these words connect to violence? How does television and violence connect together? Computer games and violence connect together? In order to really think through how violence is a part of our culture, society, and also part of our history. And also the effects of violence as well upon people, families and individuals. And what the impact of those things are. Here's a map. And here are some of the things. Now these conflicts going on around the world are current conflicts. And as you can see from the numbers, the darker colours, there are over 10,000 deaths in the past year. and it goes down. But these are just current conflicts that are going on in the world. As you can see, death, violence, war is a part of human history, and this is just what's going on in the moment, nothing to do with the past. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people have been killed or maimed or injured as a result of wars and violence in the past. So humans and violence seems to have been around forever, really. The question is, when we talk about violence, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about physical violence, where somebody causes bodily damage and death or disability, inflicts pain or does it through revenge. You've also got emotional violence, where this isn't necessarily physical but mental, causing emotional damage. And again, this is by manipulation, by instilling fear and emotional pain to control someone. So violence doesn't just mean hurting physically another human being, it can mean causing emotional damage as well. Why is violence used? Well, there's a whole range of reasons why violence is used. You have hate, greed, power, fear. Some people are mentally ill. There's jealousy. They just want to control people. They like the feeling of power. And in some cases it may well be simply self-defense. So violence isn't an easy thing to talk about, because there's a whole range of reasons and there's a whole range of things that can happen as a result, both physically and emotionally. What about Christianity and violence as well? Well, obviously this image you can see on the screen is an image that most people will be familiar with, which is about Jesus and violence. The death of Jesus by the Romans was probably one of the most violent acts that could be done at that time. And a key for Christians is, how did Jesus respond? This was a form of torture the Romans used to slowly kind of kill over a period of hours, and to make an example of people when they basically were put on the cross. So what did Jesus say as he was being treated this way? Well, he didn't try and retaliate. You could say, well, there wasn't much he could do, but he didn't also seek revenge. He didn't plead to his followers to get revenge on the Romans or anything like that. He even asked, according to the Gospels, God to forgive those who did this against him. And he told, through different teachings, his people, or the followers of Jesus, to love his enemies, to pray for those who persecute, which basically means pick on them. So if Jesus responded like this, that's what Christians should do. They would be expected to do the same. Now, as you can see on the screen, it will be useful if you can evaluate or even critique Jesus' responses to violence. Why would some people not agree with this? Why would some people be opposed to responding like this? I know that some people might think you're being a doormat, or you're allowing people to walk all over you, so on and so forth. So you're going to need to think about why reasons that this might not be